One of the big issues Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois noticed when studying blacks in Philadelphia was their lack of home ownership. The vast majority of blacks rented, and there were a few reasons for this. Now, some of the blacks did have extra money, but the extra money they had and could have spent on homes, a lot of the times they spent it in these other areas. One of the areas was in insurance. But the type of insurance companies that sold to them were ran by some very sketchy folks who did all things possible to cheat the people. And so let's continue in the 1899 book, The Philadelphia Negro, to learn a little bit about this. On the whole, the statistics show comparatively few Negro property holders in Philadelphia. In a city where the percentage of homeowners is unusually large, over 94% of the Negroes appear from the imperfect returns available to be renters. So only 6% owned homes, and the rest of the 94% were renters. There are several reasons for this. First, the Negroes distrust all saving institutions since the fatal collapse of the Freedmen's Bank, which happened in 1874. This was a bank created by Congress after the Civil War to help freed blacks save and grow their money. Thousands of blacks deposited their entire life savings into this bank, but the bank was poorly managed, and eventually thousands of them lost it all as well. So the blacks living in 1896 and 1897, when Dr. Du Bois wrote this, had learned to distrust anything to do with banks. So this here was the first reason. Secondly, they have difficulty in buying homes in decent neighborhoods. The whites didn't want Negroes in their neighborhoods, so the blacks were concentrated in the more neglected and run-down areas in the city, regardless if they could afford better or not. Thirdly, the rising price of real estate and the falling off of wage and industrial opportunity for the Negro must be taken into account. Home values went up, while black income and job availability for them went down. Finally, a curious effect of color prejudice, to be discussed later, has had enormous influence in concentrating Negro population in localities where it was hard to buy homes. So to recap, blacks didn't trust the banks, they couldn't buy in decent neighborhoods, home prices increased while jobs decreased, and Negroes were concentrated in areas where it was already hard to buy homes. Dr. Du Bois says all these contributed to why Negroes didn't own much property in Philadelphia. But I want you to pay close attention to what he's about to say next. All these are cogent reasons, meaning everything we just covered are all convincing reasons, and yet they are not enough to excuse the Negroes from not buying much more property than they have. He says even though those reasons are compelling and persuasive, they are still not good enough to excuse Negroes from not having more property. He's not allowing any wiggle room for excuses here, and here's the reason why. Much of the money that should have gone into homes has gone into costly church edifices, dues to society's dress and entertainment. The ones of them that have the extra money that could be used to buy homes are too busy using it to make the churches look fancy, paying dues to societies, and spending it on clothing and having fun. So this falls within the function of prioritizing, taking limited resources, recognizing the many areas where these resources could be used, determining the areas that are most important, necessary, and beneficial, then using the resources for them. And where the resources go is largely based on a personal or a group value system. So one person may take all of their extra money and spend it on education and property, while another person may take all of their extra money and spend it on clothes and entertainment. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing either one of these, and neither one of these are inherently better in the general sense. But if you're looking for specific outcomes, that's when the choices can be said to be either better or worse. You see? So many Negroes placed more value on churches, clothing, and entertainment. So what they spent their money on was best for that outcome. But Dr. Du Bois has the outcome of home ownership in mind. And that's why he has an issue with the way Negroes spent their extra money. If the Negroes had bought little homes as persistently as they have worked to develop a church and secret society system, and had invested more of their earnings in savings banks and less in clothes, they would be in a far better condition to demand industrial opportunity than they are today. I've said it before, Negroes could build some churches. If they were lost out in the rainforest, they would erect a church before they built a shelter for themselves. Now, obviously, I'm exaggerating, but it just goes to show how dedicated Negroes have been to building churches. He's saying if they would have used that same energy that went into building black churches and secret societies and used it in buying homes and would have spent less money on clothes, then they would have been in a much better position at that time. Yeah, it was still rough for them, but just imagine if they would have used their money in a different way, how much easier they could have made it for themselves, because there was still some opportunity there, right? This is what Dr. Du Bois is pointing out. This does not mean that the Negro is lazy or a spendthrift. It simply means misdirected energies which cause the Negro people yearly to waste thousands of dollars in rents and live in poor homes when they might, with proper foresight, do much better. He's saying it's misdirected energy, but that's only if the main goal for most Negroes was home ownership. Because if their main goal was more churches, clothes, and entertainment, then the energy was properly directed, right? It flowed where they wanted it to go. Now, obviously, Dr. Du Bois desired them to elevate in the scale of civilization. So he had a certain goal for them, and from his view, the energy was, in fact, misdirected. There are some signs of awakening to this fact among the Negroes. Lately, they are just beginning to understand and profit by the building and loan associations. Some of them were starting to realize the benefit of using their money in other areas. Some of them acquired a different understanding and made a shift in their values and priorities. 41 families in the 7th Ward, or about 2%, belong now to such associations, and the number is increasing, which was a start. And he was hopeful. Now, obviously, over time, many more people who identified as black became homeowners. But we're looking at some of the struggles and the barriers that prevented this number from increasing back then in Philadelphia. Outside the 7th Ward, as large and probably a larger percentage belonged to cooperative home buying societies. The peculiar phenomenon among the colored people, however, is the wide development of beneficial and secret orders. Those are like fraternities, sororities, and mutual aid groups that provided support and social connection for the blacks at that time. 306 families, or 17% of the Negroes of the ward, are reported as belonging to beneficial societies, and probably 25% or more actually belong. Beside these, there are the petty insurance societies, to which 1,021 families, or 42%, belong. In more prosperous times, this membership may reach 50 or 60%, or a total of at least 4,000 men, women, and children. The petty insurance societies are for the most part conducted by whites. Uh-oh, we have the whites involved. Let's see how this goes. Some of these are reliable enterprises, and by careful management and honest dealing, do something to encourage the saving spirit among the Negroes. Some of them were honest, legitimate, and actually helped Negroes tap into their money-saving self. It is doubtful, however, if they form the best kind of incentive, and probably they stand in the way of the savings bank and building association. Only a few deserve this qualified approval, which means the vast majority of them he viewed as undeserving. And here's why. The large majority are little better than licensed gambling operations. It is a disgrace that a great municipality allows them to prey upon the people in the manner they do. Most of the petty insurance societies ran by the whites were hustling blacks for their money and taking advantage of their ignorance and vulnerability. He is ashamed that a great city like Philadelphia would allow that type of activity within its city limits. They usually rest on no sound business principles. They take any and all risks, generally without medical examination, and depend on lapses in payments and bold cheating to make money. They accepted everyone from all health conditions to increase their revenue. Then they waited for Negroes to fall behind on their payments so they could keep all the money and not pay out any insurance claims later on. You see how wild this is? Even the best conducted of these societies have to depend on the unreturned contributions of persons who cannot keep up their payments to make both ends meet. That's why he compared it to gambling. Most people pay in and hope for a return, but most people don't win. And the house or the insurance company makes the profit from all the people who lose. You see, the odds were rigged against the contributors. Now observe how sneaky the whites were at rigging the odds even more in their favor. In many other cases, the matter of age is made a loophole for cheating. Numbers of the Negroes do not know their exact ages. In such cases, the insurance agent will suggest an age, usually below the evident truth, and insert it in the policy. If the insured dies, the physician guesses at another age, nearer the truth, and inserts it in the death certificate. The insurance agent would purposely put a younger age for the insured at the beginning. Then later, if he or she died, the doctor would estimate a more accurate age and put that on the death certificate. Here we go. Thereupon, the insurance company points to the discrepancy, alleges an attempt to deceive on the part of the insured, and either refuses to pay any of the policy or generally offers to compound for a half or a third of the amount promised. The insurance company would then accuse the blacks of committing fraud, when in fact it was the insurance company ran by the whites who were committing the fraud. You see how wild this is? And they would use that circumstance as an opportunity to refuse paying out any of the insurance. Or they would cut a deal and bargain on paying 1/3 or 1/2 of what they actually were supposed to pay. You see? I cannot stand people who cheat the people like this. And that's what was happening to Negroes due to ignorance and vulnerability. This is perhaps the most common form of cheating outside the failure to account for the payments of lapsed members. In some cases, the home office pays the death claim, and the local office or agent cheats the insured. It is not generally known how lucrative a business the exploitation of the Negro in various lines has become. It's like an unspoken industry. The business of exploiting the Negroes, which he doesn't know how much money is made in that line of work. In ornaments, clothes, entertainments, books, and investment schemes, the shrewd and unscrupulous have a broad field of work, and it is being industriously cultivated, especially by whites, and to some extent by certain classes of Negroes. Now look at who we have involved in the business of exploiting vulnerable Negroes. Mainly the whites, but also certain classes of Negroes who had their hand in the cookie jar as well. We already know that authentic white consciousness was formed on the basis of exploiting people, so that shouldn't be a surprise to us when we see it. But what you'll notice is that there are no shortage of blacks who will do the same. You see, there are too many blacks willing to do too many things to gain money and power. And as it was discovered that this business of exploiting vulnerable blacks was lucrative, their numbers began to multiply. So back in the 1890s, we see the exploitation of Negroes taking place in various fields and being actively grown, especially by the whites, but also by some of the Negroes. Instead then of a struggling people being met by aid in the direction of their greatest weakness, they are surrounded by agencies which tend to make them more wasteful and dependent on chance than they are now. One has only to watch the pawnbroker shops on Saturday night in winter to see how largely Negroes support them, and it is but a step from the insurance society to the pawn shop and thence to the policy shop. It can get hot and spicy in these commentaries at any time. We just never know what's going to pop up at any moment when reading through this history. But it's very important to know because it reveals certain patterns throughout history, and it serves as a guide to correct some of the mistakes and also to prevent these same mistakes from reoccurring. It's a mirror into the past that shows the steps in the journey our consciousness has traveled, and it prepares us to project where in the future it could go. You see? So from here, we're going to stop right now, and we're going to pick up in the next commentary. I thank you for your time and attention. My name is Brooklyn St. Michael, and I'll see you in the free world.